Okay, this last one is an example of finding the derivative of an inverse trig function. So we're going to do inverse sine. Just on a side note, using the chain rule on trig functions, the derivative of a composite sine function, the derivative of sine is always cosine. What's inside parentheses does not change, times the derivative of the inside function. Derivative cosine y, negative sine y, times y prime. Derivative tangent y, secant squared y, times y prime. Chain rule. That doesn't change. So, inverse trig. Go back to the definition of an inverse. Start with y equals sine x. Okay. Original function. The inverse of this is when you switch the x with a y. X equals sine y. That's the inverse. So this guy and this guy are the same thing. So taking the derivative of this is equivalent to taking the derivative of this. Okay. Derivative of x is 1. The derivative of the sine of anything is the cosine of that anything. But this inside function is not just x, so you need to use a chain rule. Times y prime. Now solve this for y prime, and you'll have the derivative of the inverse of sine. And I'm going to move terms to the other side, so y prime's over here. But divide both sides by cosine, you get 1 over cosine. So y prime equals 1 over cosine y. But now he started with a function with x's in it, and he ended up with a function with y's in it. That's really kind of a bummer, right? But we know that sine squared plus cosine squared always equals 1. So if I went like this, a little side note, the sine squared of y plus the cosine squared of y equals 1. All right, well, here's cosine squared. There's cosine. Let's solve this for cosine. All right, so cosine y, I have to subtract this from both sides. And then I need to take the square root to get to cosine. So the cosine of y equals that. Now I have a sine squared y, or sine y squared. Okay, but up here, the sine of y is equal to x. So this guy is 1 minus the sine of y squared. But the sine of y is equal to x. So I can put an x in there. That's just a little side algebra. The cosine of y equals this. My derivative has that in it. So, I draw an arrow from here. Y prime equals, y prime 1 over the cosine of y, which is this guy, the square root of 1 minus x squared. Cool.